What's up guys, my name is Devin and welcome back to another episode of Footballrs. In today's video, we're gonna be unboxing and reviewing the Nike Air Zoom Vapor Pro 1. Let's do it. All right guys, so here are the cleats we're gonna be talking about today. Again, these are the Nike Zoom Air Vapor Pro 1s. First things first, let's take a look at the box. Just your standard Nike box, orange, big swoosh there. And of course, I already showed you guys the tag. These are white, black, and stadium green. So pretty fun colorway. Let's get into the box. Ooh, yeah. Oh, these are cool. I'm hyped about these. So every couple years, Nike releases like a new Vapor line and a Pro model, and the Pro model always seems to be the crowd favorite, my favorite. And I think this year they've done another pretty good job. So let's take a look at these. First things first, let's get them out of the paper, get the paper out of the cleats, and here they are. Also, this green and white colorway is very nice. Big fan of this. First things first, let's talk about the upper. So this has kind of like a synthetic upper. It is a little bit different from the Speeds. The Speeds had like a more grippy texture, and this one is a little bit smoother. So I'm not really exactly sure what it is. Every year, you know, Nike kind of comes up with some new synthetic material that works for the outside of the cleat, and that's what they've done again here. But this material kind of goes all the way throughout the cleat and then meets up with an inner booty. So this cleat does have kind of like a sock liner that goes underneath and then stitches into the upper that we just talked about. So let's see if we can get a good look at that. It is a little bit tough to see because it's dark and because of the ankle cuff, but there is kind of a liner in there that kind of fits like a sock, and that's gonna be that booty I was just talking about. And it stitches into this kind of like in here somewhere. So if we kind of push this open, you guys will see at the very base, the two materials are attached. Now, at first I thought it was stitched, but I just pulled it apart and I think it's just glue. So honestly, I don't love that. I think I'm pulling it apart like actively. You guys can't see it, but I think it's just glue. I mean, I'm sure there's gotta be some sort of stitching here at the bottom, but definitely not stitched as well as I would like. I forgot to mention some of the cool details, so we'll hit those real quick. Black and silver swoosh. You do have the Air Zoom here, so that's gonna refer to this Air Zoom unit we're gonna talk about later. You have the Vapor branding here, and then big Nike swoosh in the same color as the color, and then Air Zoom on here as well. Air Zoom was not in the Speed model we reviewed last week, so a little bit different. And then on the tongue, it says Vapor, swoosh, and then go your fastest. And then this cleat says the same thing. I was hoping they'd switch it up. Sometimes they do like one saying on one cleat, one on the other, but nothing cool like that this year. So of course the tongue is kind of part of that one-piece booty here, and you guys can see it's a nice thin material. The actual weave is like kind of a cool looking design here. But you guys can tell it's plenty thin. You can see my finger right through it, so that's gonna allow the cleat to breathe nicely, get that hot air out of your feet and keep your feet a little bit cooler. And then like most Pro models, this does have a ankle cuff, which is always nice. I love a good ankle cuff. And this one looks pretty much the same as the last couple. Honestly, the overall cleat just looks very similar as the last couple Pro models. This right here is the previous one. You guys can see it's a very similar design philosophy. I'm pretty sure it's even the same tongue material here and probably the same ankle cuff material. So they haven't really changed much from this to this, except for the traction plate, which we'll talk about in a bit. Also, they do feel a little bit lighter than I expected. The Speeds I noticed were kind of heavy. Of course, we're gonna weigh these in a bit and kind of see if they're actually light or if they just feel a little bit lighter. But next thing, let's talk about the lacing system. So lacing system is pretty much the same as the last couple of years. So they just have these eyelet holes cut into the upper, and then you tighten it up and it pulls the material together and hugs your foot. Also, these do have the runner's loop down here. So I've talked about that in a bunch of videos. Just a cool way to lace your cleats to get more lockdown in the heel. Also, I just noticed these do have a front and rear kind of loop to help you slip on the cleat, which I always like. Just makes things a little bit easier. Also, check out this heel cup. It's not as sharp as last year's, but it's still very prominent. It's definitely one of the bigger heel cups on the market. I'm not sure why they make them so big. I don't really see the point, but I'm sure there's some scientific reason that Nike has decided that's the way to do it. Let's pop out the insole real quick. The Speeds were glued in, and yep, I hear the glue ripping. So same thing, looks like it's gonna be the same insole. It does have a nice little Vapor branding there on there. You guys can see where it's glued in. This is all glue residue. Funny enough, there's no glue in the front part, which is a little bit interesting, but that's it. The glue's still sticky. Let's see what's underneath the glue. So this is what's underneath. There's no plastic shank like we've seen on the last model. Honestly, I really liked it. I liked how the insoles on those had like a grid that kind of locked it in there. They don't have that this year. Pretty much a whole new traction plate with this Air Zoom unit, which I thought I would be able to see from here, but I don't know if you guys can really get in there, but you don't really see any of the Zoom unit whatsoever, so we'll have to take a look at that and see what's going on there. Let me put the insole back in. Now let's take a look at some of the padding. So the padding in here honestly looks super minimal. Like, it does not look to be very thick. It's honestly looks like it's like there's not a lot of padding at all. There's still a nice area for your heel to kind of sink into, like I mentioned earlier, but the padding itself is kind of lackluster. I think they've had way more padding on their last Pro model. Let me actually look, because now I'm curious. It's a little bit tough to see in there, but there is a little bit more padding. Honestly, it's more similar than I thought, so we'll see how that feels on foot. With that being said, it's time to look at the newest feature, the traction plate. So this is the same traction plate as the Speeds with the addition of the Air Zoom unit. So this is something we've won in football cleats for a while. They did it back in the early 2000s, but now they've brought it back. Air Zoom is a very popular cushioning system from Nike. They put in a lot of basketball shoes and other shoes like that. But they finally put it back in a football cleat here in the forefoot. So we're gonna see how that works, how that feels underfoot. I'm very excited about that. This is something I've been looking forward to for a long time. And then it looks like you also have kind of a plastic shank running right underneath the outside part of the traction plate. So they did have one of these plastic shanks on the last model, but you could see it underneath the insole, but now it's kind of embedded into the traction plate, and this is gonna give the cleat some spring and give it some rigidity and just kind of move with you. So as far as the traction plate itself, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 studs here in that green part, and then this circle piece that has kind of 4 studs, a little bit tough to see, but it's got 4 studs in there. So this design is very popular in soccer cleats. It kind of helps you stay gripped in the ground when you're turning, kind of gives you some rotation on that point and keeps you locked in. Pretty cool. I did talk about it a little bit when I reviewed the Speeds, but honestly, skill players and soccer players do make a lot of similar movements, so it does make sense. I don't love it, but it does make a little bit of sense to have this in a football cleat for skill guys. Then in the rear, you do have 3 studs. Nike usually has been doing 4 lately, but they did do a couple cleats back in the 2010s that did have 3 studs, so I guess they're going back to that. But overall, very interesting traction plate. I've already kind of reviewed it with the Speeds, but I haven't touched on the Zoom yet because the Speeds don't have the Air Zoom. So maybe that'll make it a little bit different. I guess we'll see. So I think that's gonna about do it for my first impressions unboxing. New traction plate, Air Zoom. Can't wait to test that out. So without further ado, let's get them on the grass and see how they do. Now that you guys have watched the full unboxing, it's time to dive into the review. In the review, we're gonna focus on a couple of things: comfort, fit, and support. We're gonna weigh the cleat, traction, style, what position these cleats are best for, and of course, the price. First thing we're gonna talk about is the comfort. The comfort on these was much better than the Speeds, but still honestly not that impressive. Right out of the box, these things were super stiff, and again, the break-in process was pretty brutal. The cleat is super tight and cramped all around, but definitely starts to open up a bit after a while. While this cleat isn't as raw feeling as the Speeds, it does still have a bit of a raw feel. The booty within the cleat is something that Nike's been doing on their Pro models for quite some time, and they always feel pretty good. It's like an inner sock liner that hugs your foot nicely. It honestly just feels like a sock. The tongue part on these is the same as the previous model. There's no padding on there, so you do feel the pressure of the laces on the top of the foot, which I don't love at all. Also, the padding in the heel is pretty minimal, and you do feel your foot and ankle kind of pressed up against the cleat. But my biggest gripe with these, hands down, is that at the very top part of the upper, near the ankle cuff, it digs into you, and it is very, very annoying. It cuts right in around your ankle bone, and honestly just isn't great. I'm not a fan of that whatsoever. I've heard it from other people, and it's true. Now it's time to talk about the cushioning. The insole on these is the same as the past. It's a thin Nike insole they've been rolling with for years, but with this model, they added Zoom Air in the forefoot, and you really do feel it. Even though this cleat has the same traction plate as the Speeds, the cushioning in this cleat is much, much better because of the Air Zoom. You really do feel it, but it doesn't give the cleat an overly cushy feel. It's just a really nice balance overall. Also, these cleats do have a front and rear loop, which helps make them easier to slide on, which is always super nice to have. Overall, not the most comfortable cleat. They're stiff, they don't have enough padding in the rear, but the Air Zoom is definitely an upgrade from the Speeds we reviewed last week. The next thing we're gonna talk about is the fit and support. The fit on these is very tight. I bought these in my regular size, and I think if I was to get a new pair, I'd go a half size or maybe even a full size up. They were just super tight all around in the toe box, on the sides, and in the heel. It is important to note that I'm the type of guy who likes to have a little bit of space in the cleat to let my foot breathe a little, but these had absolutely none whatsoever. With that being said, they were super secure on my foot. They did not move whatsoever throughout any of the testing process. They're just locked on. They don't move whatsoever, so you can feel really good getting in and out of cuts, no issues. It honestly did feel like an extension of my foot, which is what you want in a football cleat. So yeah, the fit on these is just super, super tight, so if that's the kind of thing you like, these are gonna be the perfect cleat for you. These also have the runner's loop, which I mentioned a little bit in the unboxing. That is just offering an alternative way to lace them up and get a little bit more heel lockdown. The support on these is honestly pretty good for a skill cleat. Now, of course, this is a low-base football cleat. It does have a bit of an ankle cuff, and that gives you like the tiniest bit of ankle support, but truly, it is a low football cleat if you just delete that little ankle collar. But the upper is pretty strong and stable, so when you go to cut, you're not kind of bursting through the upper. It supports you and gets you in and out of cuts, no issues. Overall, they fit very, very tight, and the support is pretty good for a skill cleat. The next thing we're gonna do is weigh the cleat. These cleats weighed in at 11.3 ounces. Now these cleats aren't light by any means, but after I saw the weight of the speeds, I kind of expected these to be bricks. 11.3 honestly isn't too bad, and they don't feel as heavy on foot. They packed a lot of tech in these, including the air zoom unit, so I'm pretty happy with the 11.3 number on these. The next thing we're going to talk about is the traction plate. Just a forewarning, a lot of this is going to be repetitive from the speed video because it is the exact same traction plate, but this is an all new traction plate for this year and very reminiscent of a soccer traction plate. It's a one-piece traction plate and it has a bunch of uniquely shaped studs throughout. The stud placement is extremely wide, so you guys should be able to cut no problem. In the front, it has 9 blade studs around the outside and then 4 studs in a circle right in the middle of the cleat. The outside studs help dig into the dirt and cut. The inner circle part is super popular on soccer cleats and helps them turn gradually and have plenty of grip when doing so. And then in the rear, you've got 3 blade studs. This is pretty standard, it just kind of helps with everything, gives you a nice anchor in the back. In the middle of the cleat, you'll notice this kind of beam that runs through the center. That beam kind of helps move with you and keeps the cleat flexible and allows your foot to kind of move naturally within the cleat. It also gives the cleat a bit of rigidity, but the cleat itself is honestly still pretty flexible. I can really just fold it in half with no problem. But this cleat does appear to have some sort of grid underneath that gives it a little bit more stability as well, but still not as much as the past model. Just for proof, this is the past model and I can't get it past that, so definitely more flexible this year. With that being said, the plate isn't as springy as the previous models, but it still does a good job kind of pushing you into that next step. Now I mentioned this a little bit, but I know this is the same traction plate as the Speeds, but with the addition of the Zoom Air unit, I like it a little bit more. It just made the cleat feel a little bit more comfortable, more responsive, and I felt like the traction was a little bit better as well. I felt really good going in and out of breaks, and I only slipped like once or twice. Overall, it's all right. I don't think it's as good as some of the past cleats I really liked when they were super stiff and they would really launch you into that next step, but it's all right. It's not too bad. So try it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. The next we're going to talk about is the style. Now I think this is a great looking cleat. Nike's followed the exact same silhouette for a while now and it looks pretty good. These have a couple cool details like the swooshes on the outside, the swoosh on the inside with the air zoom, and then some vapor branding on the tongue and on the side. The color scheme itself is pretty simple, but I'm a fan. It kind of has like this cool fade thing going on. I really like that. I like how it's like main color here and then it kind of fades into white and then it blends seamlessly into your white socks if you're wearing white socks. And then I think they also have some that fade into black, so if you guys wear black socks, that will work perfectly for you guys. These do come in a bunch of different team colorways, so feel free to check those out. Next thing we're gonna talk about is what position these cleats are best for. Now these are definitely a skill football cleat. The Nike Vapor line is always a skill football cleat, but it often gets worn by a lot of big skill guys as well. These are built with speed and agility in mind, but big skill guys are getting faster and faster every year, so these cleats are beginning to suit them as well. But in my opinion, these cleats are gonna be best for QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and DBs, and then we're also gonna see some tight ends and linebackers in them as well. The next thing we're gonna talk about is the price. These cleats retail for $145. As you guys probably know by now, these are the mid-tier option from Nike, and $145 feels a little bit high, but that's about where skill cleats are at this point. For $145, it's a good cleat, but I think I might prefer something else. I'm honestly still on the fence about it. I've been battling it all day trying to review these. I don't know where I sit on these yet. I think there's some other cleats I might get instead. They're growing on me. Overall, honestly, I'm not totally in love with these, but I do think they're still a good skill football cleat. They do lack a little bit in the comfort department, but the air zoom honestly feels pretty good under the front part of your foot, giving you a good feel. The fit on these is very, very tight, and they do have a bit of a harsh braking process, and also the traction plate, this new one that they've got on there, is pretty solid. Then of course they come in that classic Nike Vapor silhouette, and they come in a whole bunch of different colorways, so you guys should have no problem finding the one you need to match your team. Overall, it's a solid football cleat from Nike, but I just think that they can do better. I think they have the money and the resources to really innovate and do something a little bit different, and I think that they could have done a little bit better with these. There you guys have it. There's the full unboxing review on the Nike Air Zoom Vapor Pro 1. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to like the video, comment what you guys want to see us do next, and make sure you guys subscribe for more videos just like this one. My name is Devin, and thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of Footballrs.